So I have a background in media, kind of paid media, digital. Obviously born and bred in London, spent 7 or 8 years working for a company called Dentsu. Moved out to Singapore in 2019, just before the pandemic hit. And had a good 6 year stint over there. Learned a lot about the Asian market, the diversity of the countries that operate in that market. Moved into the world of sport while I was out there, and then relocated back to the UK and joined EMW Global. So EMW Global kind of sit at the intersection of brands, rights holders, athletes, talent. As a company founded in China as well. We have a really diverse set of markets actually across Asia, LATAM, and our headquarters in London, as well as Dubai. And really our job is to kind of connect brands with sporting talent, IPs, rights holders, leagues, etc., in a way that kind of creates as much value for both sides. We also represent talent directly, and we activate partnerships through things like content production, social media, experiential, kind of the suite of marketing services that agencies offer.
That's interesting. And like, obviously you're focusing on global sport. You've got branches in different locations and you're working with people in different demographics. And that's sometimes a very difficult thing to do. Obviously, maybe language barriers and just knowing and understanding those different markets. Do you think that global deals still make sense if the behavior is so localized?
It's a good question. I think in some capacity, yes. The interesting thing about sport is that it transcends cultures and markets in a lot of ways. So, of course, there's a lot of cultural nuance, and as I mentioned, we operate in China, LATAM, London. You couldn't have really three more diverse markets in the way that not only the way that people operate and people work, our teams internally, but also the way that fans consume sport. So I think there's a layer of things that resonate globally. So some global sport deals will still resonate well, but the partnerships that will last and the partnerships that are having impact, especially more in recent years, are those that are truly localized, because global brands that don't play into local markets will miss a huge opportunity. So they might still get the broad awareness piece that a global partnership has to offer, but you're not going to get the kind of brand equity that comes from truly localizing into those markets. And that's what I think we do really effectively, because we have those teams on the ground that really understand the culture, understand the fans, understand what works well, and we create partnerships that we think will work into those markets.
You're working both sides. You're working from the brand side and the athlete side. And do you find that there's different attitudes in different regions to the brands that you're dealing with, like brand side more than athlete side? So maybe like a Chinese brand or a UK based brand looking to go into different markets. Do you feel like they treat things differently, or they understand the things that you do?
There's definitely differences for sure. There's a lot of cultural nuance. The expectations are always different. I think there's, especially in Asian markets, perhaps the attitudes are a little bit more traditional in terms of how brands approach sports partnerships. That's definitely changing. I think more brands in China are seeing the diversity of opportunity that comes from sports partnerships, whereas before, and still to a certain degree now, it's still about that kind of headline brand name, or a sports name that helps to promote their brand in the market. I think there's more of a move towards the diversification of those partnerships themselves. In the UK and more so in the West, I guess it's that we're pretty a bit further along that journey potentially in terms of those partnerships, right? So the expectation of brands in the West would already be a little bit further along that path of just going beyond the broad sponsorship into something more tangible.
Is that because of the sports that, or for example, the UK Premier League, all those kind of, like, getting that distributed across the world would be a lot easier than localized Chinese football league, for example, or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there's the IPs in the West are just further along that journey as well, right? Like the Premier League has been the biggest sporting entity on the planet for, I don't know, 20 years more. And brands have just gone further on that journey, I think, in the Premier League in terms of how they can bring those partnerships to life. So So yeah, I think that's probably a big part of it. And like you say, we operate both sides of the model. So we're seeing the requests that come through change quite significantly, and the importance of talent and athletes is increasing a lot. You know, talent as their own brands is something that we're seeing happen a lot for the people that we represent.
Like we spoke about before the call, and the athletes as brands being a major part of what you do, and it's becoming more and more important. Is being a big name enough nowadays globally to get yourself into different markets, or are the companies within the localized regions wanting more localized talent?
Yeah, so brands as athletes is a really interesting topic. We're doing a big research piece, which depending on when this podcast comes out, we'll either have just launched or about to launch. We're partnering with a company called X plus Y Market Intelligence, who kind of track athlete value essentially. So visibility through things like digital social search, but also the monetary value that they are capitalizing on from that visibility. And what we're tending to see is that athletes are becoming a lot more kind of conscious of the value that they hold themselves as their own brands. So I think when we're looking at kind of global brands that are looking to tap into talent, of course, there's a localization element that has to play into the partnership that we're brokering. I think the authenticity of the talent is the primary focus, really. So we help on kind of both sides of the equation at EMW. We have a pretty rigorous kind of 4 stages that we go through with brands. So that starts with kind of an in-depth brand discovery session. So if it's a new brand that we're working with, we work with their marketing and sales guys to understand the brand as much as possible. We move through into the strategic planning consultancy, where we kind of help them to identify what KPIs they're trying to hit. Are they trying to just go for the global mass awareness? Are they trying to translate their product or their brand into something more tangible for a local audience? Which countries and markets are they trying to reach? They're often quite diverse. And then we go from there into identifying the right talent and IP, which could be someone that we represent or not, and pushing that through into the actual management of the partnership, the content, the production, the activation, and then the analytics on the other side. So yeah, I think what we tend to see is that depending on the KPI that is being met, the ask of the athlete would be quite different. So we would have some campaigns where it's pure global brand awareness, but more and more, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's being more localized, more nuanced in the way that we're activating those talent. And you're seeing as well, like the athletes, the IPs they're just getting better and better at doing this, right? They understand the value that they hold through their playing career and also afterwards. We work with quite a few who are, ex-players, and they are more and more tapping into that localization element, and it's becoming more important for them.
What kind of things would an athlete have to do to make sure they are relevant to brands and sponsors? I imagine that's something you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Like some will do that naturally, but like some people might have to try and force themselves a bit more.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some. I say forcing is probably the wrong terminology. You don't ever want to force something that isn't natural to the talent, because that's a potentially short-term fix, but it's never going to work on the long term, right? Like if you are an athlete who has a big brand presence and you're activating partnerships that aren't organic to you or to the way that you behave in the public eye, people are going to understand, right? And like more and more, they're becoming conscious of where partnerships are a bit more forced versus where they're kind of natural. So we represent the South African fly half, Sasha Feinberg and Gobler Zulu. He's been an Adidas guy for his entire life. Like, loves Adidas, has like more pairs of Adidas trainers than I can count. And we just recently signed a deal with him for a global Adidas partnership. So you can check out on our social and stuff. We've done some great behind the scenes stuff with him in Germany, the Adidas HQ. And that's like a really great example, just a very natural partnership. You can tell the excitement. You can tell this is a brand that he really wants to work with and represent, and vice versa on the other side. It's just a really natural fit for Adidas, because Sash is like the guy. You know, he really represents the sport in a great light. So yeah, I mean, we're trying wherever possible to make sure that we're finding those natural fits that work on the brand side and on the athlete side.
It's quite interesting sometimes when you think about it, and some brands will want an athlete that is big on social media. They're always posting. They've got an audience that's following them personally. But then I imagine some brands will want someone who isn't like that they can mold into their shape and their feel, who has a reputation just because how good they actually are. The values of those two people, are they, because if you look at it, you think, well, the person with the most attention would be worth the most money. But with work that you're doing on both sides of the table, do you find that it's different?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, inherently in a world where metrics are just so important to a lot of people, like naturally, obviously, the talent that gets the biggest numbers are the ones that command the biggest fees, but they're also potentially the ones that have the least flexibility. So I think there's a middle ground to be found, and I think what we're trying to do actually at EMW is, you know, we do work with a lot of the biggest names in the world of football and other sports as well, but so that's, you know, not to discount the value of those partnerships, but I think we're also trying to identify that kind of like rising star, you know, like the emerging athlete that we feel can carry value to brands. And like I said before, you know, we have talent that we represent, and of course we're always, you know, trying to build their own brand identity and find the right partnerships for them. But when we're working with a brand, we don't exclude anyone really. So we're working with them to identify, based on what sport, what market, who are those kind of rising stars where you can potentially, you know, look for a really long-term partnership. The dream for us really is that we find a partnership that lasts for, you know, decades, like a Michael Owen. You know, we do work with Michael, and he's had a 30-year partnership with Umbros. You know, that's like that's the gold star, right? And that's the kind of thing that you're trying to achieve as an agency, and I guess as a brand, if you can find that talent that you can kind of rise with that as a partnership, like they did, you know, Michael did with Umbro. I think they signed when he was 14, so before he even, you know, before he was even playing for Liverpool, I guess frequently. That's the dream, I think, for everyone that works in sports partnerships.
As someone who's working across things globally, do you find that different regions are often after different things? I suppose it comes to mind is I've done a lot of work in the Middle East with companies out there, and they often will go for the biggest name, and they will try and think, right, we'll just put Ronaldo or Mo Farah or, do you know what I mean, that name on everything, and it would make sense because obviously a big name. But really, if they looked a bit deeper, they probably could find people who were from their country that were actually performing really well, that would get more traction with locals. How do you find that balance and that conversation day to day?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that process that I spoke to earlier, right? Of what is the brand trying to achieve? There's obviously, you know, there are moments in time where there is just great value to be driven by some of these big partnerships. So the World Cup's coming up, right? We do a lot of work with Argentinian Football Association. There's a lot of opportunity, you know, fans in the Middle East and Asia, they absolutely love Messi. Of course they do. You know, he's like he's the biggest star going. So if there's an opportunity for a brand to do a partnership in that space at a time where the World Cup will be the biggest sporting event probably in history, or certainly in football, that's still an opportunity. And we shouldn't be just discounting that entirely. But you're right. I think I'm seeing more when we speak to brands in the Middle East and Asia that they are really interested in those local opportunities. I think the local assets are becoming more globalized in themselves, and a lot of them are doing a really good job of kind of modernizing the way they sell themselves and the opportunities that come with that. And on an athlete, from an athlete perspective, as I mentioned before, as they're building their own brands, that holds true as well for those markets too. So yeah, I think there's a balance, right? I think there are examples where that global partnership is just going to give you a really big boost in awareness at a key time, and sometimes that's what a brand needs. Like they're just looking for that big hit of awareness, and that's kind of what, in terms of their marketing mix and their funnel, that's what they need. And there's more and more though. I think there's great opportunities to resonate more with fans through either truly localized global partnerships or local athlete talent that resonates directly to the market they're operating in.
Just thinking now to like the nuts and bolts of things and how you put things together, it might be interesting for people to hear that process. I think even though it's something that I imagine it would unfold through the conversations you have with them, but say a brand came to you, and maybe let's start with the brand. How would they, like, what would be the steps that they come to you with they want to access a certain market with their company? How do you speak to them, and what would you offer them in that process, and how long will that take?
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty robust consultancy process, so it's not a hugely lengthy period of time. But yeah, that consultancy is obviously really important. We don't just jump straight to here's a partner, unless they come to us and say we specifically want to activate this partner, and we can do that. That's fine. If brand wants what they want, that's not an issue. But in the example you mentioned there, where a brand's coming to us and they're looking for support, we have a kind of 2 to 3 week period where we work very closely with them. We like to have a really in-depth session with as many of their team as possible to just get a download of information from them. That will be things like what growth targets are they trying to hit, what are the metrics that matter most to them from a marketing point of view, where are their gaps, where are their challenges, what are they trying to sell, why do they think sport is the right opportunity for them. Based on all of that, we come back to them with a bit of a proposal process. It could be, if it's a blank slate, it could be, these are the sports that we think work best for you, these are the markets we think work best for you. We go through that process with them. And then in terms of the kind of, say we get to a point where we have an understanding on the areas that we're trying to work with them on. We have at EMW, we have a pretty unparalleled access into the world of sport, I'd say. So there's not a lot of people that we can't speak to if we need to. And from there, it's just that process of working on the IP, the athlete side, and on the brand side, and we operate as that middleman from end to end, from identifying the property, the contracting, the execution, the activation, content production, everything. So. And because of the teams that we have, we can do that effectively, whether it's a Chinese brand coming west or a Western brand going east, or pretty much anything we can cover.
Would you often have the athletes and the assets already in house, or would you have to reach out to people depending on what that brand wanted?
A bit of both. We have like a relatively small roster of represented talent. I think probably about a dozen. And like I said before, that we always have their best interests at heart. So if we truly think that they are the right partner, then we could recommend them. It's probably a 50-50 split maybe, or actually probably leans more towards those that we don't represent than we do in terms of the partnerships that we're activating. So yeah, we're open to either. We do what we think is best for the brand. And on the athlete side, we have, we work with them on a day-to-day basis. It's not oh, here's a deal, let's have a conversation. It's, we're building their brand with them. We're producing strategies for them in terms of how they can build a commercially viable property of themselves, and then we help to activate that further down the line as well.
And through your experience, what are some of the reasons why some deals will break down, essentially? What are some of the things that go wrong that you think brands speaking to you need to watch out for?
I think clarity and expectation is number one, really. I think probably the biggest hurdle tends to be the second. The monetary part is generally relatively straightforward. It's the expectation that comes from the back of it that potentially can sometimes cause problems, where if a brand has a certain expectation on what they will get as part of their partnership, how many videos can they produce, what can they do with the asset that they are partnering with, that's where I think maybe there can be more of a challenge. But that's also our role, is to make sure that that's very clear from the offset what the expectations are and what can be achieved. And also, like I said before, we manage the partnership, and we don't just kind of do the deal and we're out of there. It's we manage that partnership on the brand and the IP side. So our role is to make sure that they don't break down. And if there are any challenges, that we help to overcome them. So yeah, I mean that's what we tend to see, though. I would say is that maybe it's an alignment of expectations, and that's where maybe historically brokering agencies that just do the deal and see you later. That's where brands and IPs can then have headaches, especially like you say, if you're operating a Chinese brand and a Western IP that maybe haven't had the experience of operating in each other's markets. That's where you can have that issue. But that's, we are the kind of translator of those two, and that's where we come in, really.
That's good, yeah. And looking forward now, which markets do you think are underestimated in terms of their exposure levels, or things that you see that are, obviously you're working across the world in different regions, you're seeing things more than most people would in the company you're working with and yourself personally. Yeah. What do you think are the areas that people are underestimating in terms of what they can do?
So Asia, just in general, but Asia outside, we've done a lot of work in China, and China's a relatively developed market in terms of sports partnerships, but we're seeing a lot from India right now. I think it's a big opportunity. Obviously, they hold, I think, the number one sports property in the world. If you look at viewership in terms of the IPL, sport runs in their veins as much as any country on earth, I think. So, of course, that's a big opportunity, and we're seeing actually a lot more brand activity coming from India, Southeast Asia in general. It's obviously, I lived in Singapore for a long time, so I understand that region, but it's a complex market in terms of the diversity of each country. Every Southeast Asian market is its own entity, and you really need to understand that market individually. But they are, they're big growth markets. I would say LATAM, the vicinity to the upcoming World Cup in a few months' time means that LATAM is a big growth opportunity for us and for sports in general, and the Women's World Cup as well in Brazil next year. So I think a lot of brands are looking to that part of the world in general for this in next year. So yeah, so those two areas are probably where we're as EMW we're putting a bit more of our focus, as well as the kind of the core of the business, which has historically been in kind of China and London.
That's interesting. And like over the next 5-10 years, there's obviously lots of innovations happening in different areas of the sport. And something we talked about previously was around fans and athletes, around clubs and communities owning their own data, being first party rather than relying on media brands in between there. And obviously the rise of AI and things being easier to develop internally. What do you see happens over the next 5-10 years over these big assets that you're talking about there, like the IPL and the Premier League and that sort of stuff? Like looking at the landscape now, and then looking for 2037, where do you think it's going to be?
Feels like a long way away, 2037.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really it's a very interesting and exciting time, I think, to be in the industry. I was thinking actually, as I was kind of prepping for the podcast, that, when I first started in the media world in early 2010s, getting data was just hard. Like it wasn't that straightforward, getting reliable, insightful data. And that was in the media landscape here, right? Where you're data first, and sport is some way behind media, really, in terms of how they understand fans and audiences. So access to data is incredible now, right? Like we can get pretty much in 5 seconds, we can get any piece of information that we need with reliable backed sources. So that step change is where I think sports is going to really level up over the coming years. There's the ability to understand fan data is just going to massively increase and improve. And I think you're seeing as well the kind of media side of the business. They're understanding the value of sports more and more. So you saw, Publicis just bought my previous agency 160over90 for $500 million. It's like, that's a big investment in the space, right? And they're doing that because of the access that agency has into the world of sport. Because, in the world of AI, sport kind of transcends it to a certain degree, because sport will always have that emotional, cultural connection that a lot of brands are seeking, right? And a lot of people still want to hold those partnerships and those connections to the world of sport. So I think there'll be a big move into, like you say, the first party ownership piece, into monetization of fans in a more intelligent way. It's something that we're working on our side as well. And you'll just see also that kind of media and sports landscape merge more frequently. So I think, where previously a lot of sport agencies would be either, working just on the brokering part, or you might work on the activation part, you'll see more teams that are diversifying across kind of end to end. So understanding the fan and the opportunity all the way through to activating and the media and the media buying and reporting and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of the big opportunity, I think, where the next 5 years. And as we spoke about before, I think the athlete brand economy is just going to continue to grow and grow. And over time, I think those individuals will just become more valuable to brands and to partnerships in general. So that's something we're investing heavily in right now, is how our own talent can make sure they're ready for that next step.
Yeah, it's interesting. And my head, I think about the recent Netflix and boxing on there, and there was talk of like 30 million people watching the Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul fight. And before, we'd have had watch TV and we'd have guessed how many people watched that based on like the old school methods of counting it. Now we actually know exactly which people watch that show, and they can be fed more of that. So you can see those brands getting more and more powerful. And you just think with Premier League and IPL, and if they can control that data, they'll be able to push that to brands and sponsors in a more meaningful way than any like TV channel or TV company would do. It's just fascinating, really. So just to wrap up, a bit of advice, I suppose, for people getting into the space. Like, you've obviously lived in different regions, in different roles across different geographics. For someone getting into the space, someone younger potentially, what would you suggest they do right now in a world where it's a bit more difficult to break through the noise than I imagine it was when you first started out your career?
Yeah. I mean, we're relatively small agency, but I think the thing that, when we're speaking to people that are coming out of university or looking for opportunities in sport, it's really being proactive. I'd say number one, reach out to as many people as you can, speak to as many people as you can. There's no shortage of people that love sport in the world, and we're in a fortunate position where I get to work in it every day, and there's a lot of people that would love to do the same. So I think it's really just being proactive, showing your passion for the world of sport, and just have a perspective, I guess, in terms of the direction that things are traveling. Like I said, that the access to information is there in a way that it wasn't when I started out, and it hasn't been for any point in history, really. So the information is there. I think the more that you can show value to organizations, even when you're new and starting out, I think if you show the passion, the hunger, and also where you can add value, that's what, from a personal point of view, that's what I like to see when I speak to people, is that they've really kind of thought about the area that they can improve things in. And like I say, I think it's just a really exciting opportunity and time to get into the world, because I think it's progressing massively. There's a lot of investment into, even like on the club side, right? A lot of these Premier League clubs are now investing hugely in their marketing budgets or the content production, and the opportunities are going to continue to grow. I don't see it stopping in a world where sport is just going to continue to be hugely impactful to people. So where other industries might kind of ebb and flow, I think sport will just continue to grow. So get involved. It's a great place to work, and I definitely would recommend it to anyone that wants to.